were standing by to catch me if I'd fall. You're my hero, chasing the monsters from my room, going on trips around the moon. The one who's always been there faithfully. You're my hero, and 'cause you're my dad, I'm twice as blessed and lucky to be me. As I kept getting older, we often disagreed, but you let me find myself in my own way. And it's funny how just lately I've come to recognize how wise you are becoming every day. There's so much you've given me. I hope I made you proud. You're everything a dad should be, and it's time to tell you now. You're my hero. You didn't have to say a word. Your love was the message that I heard, inspiring me to be all I can be. You're my hero, and 'cause you're my dad, I'm twice as blessed and lucky. I'm so lucky to be me. Dad, you're my hero.
That's a beautiful song. The Bible says in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 29, it says, as a father carries his son, as a father carries his son. Psalm 103, verse 13, as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. I do often wonder, I do often muse this question of how my children will remember me. I doubt, in fact, that my own father really gave legacy 5 seconds of thought. I doubt, frankly, my dad could spell legacy. I don't know that he ever thought about how I might think of him one day, how I'd remember him. My father's dad was mean to him. He beat him when he was young. And he was hateful to him even as an adult. But yet my dad still honored his dad until he died. When I was a little kid, my sister and I hated to have to get in the car and drive with my dad and mom up to Vernon to see my father's dad. Papa Legear, his name was. Typically had overalls and a long sleeve shirt and a dip of snuff, typically running down the side of his cheek. But even those days, I could sense as a kid. I don't remember Papa Legear being particularly warm to my dad, even when the old man was in his 80s. I do not remember him ever being appreciative of my father visiting him or caring for him. Certainly, I never saw my father's dad ever express any sense of remorse for how he had treated my father as a child. But I do remember my dad taking care of the old buzzard till he died. And I was always perplexed by that, how you could care so. As a young man, I just watched him. How do you keep going up and checking on your dad when he was so hateful to you? So I remember, as you do your fathers, I remember today Moses Legear, and I remember him as my hero. Not everybody can say that. Not everybody can say their father was their hero. Some of you some could long forget their father. Some never really had the privilege to know their father. I'm just grateful today that I had a great dad. My dad was not athletic. He could hardly hit a baseball. But he was my baseball coach. When I started playing baseball, he assisted the coach. Now what that meant was my dad kind of helped carry in those days, a big old army bag of bats and balls. My dad would carry them to the field and just there to kind of keep us from hurting ourselves. He did that when I was 8 years old, 9 years old. When I was 10 years old, our head coach was there less and less, so my father, the assistant coach, became the head coach. And my dad could never, you know how when the game starts, you have, you know, you hit the ball and you say to the third baseman, you know, all right, get one. You know, the coach hits it down to third base and third baseman, my dad could never, he might say, all right, third baseman, get one. And he might hit the ball and it may go to the second baseman or he might go to right field or he'd whiff it, he'd swing it. I was a pitcher as I got older and had a wicked roundhouse curveball through side arm. And those days when the catcher wasn't able to come out and he was getting his gear on, maybe he had just batted the last out, so he was late coming out. So my dad would grab the catcher's mitt and would come and catch me up. And when I'd see my dad come out with a mitt, I'd say, oh my goodness, you know, because Dad couldn't catch either. I mean, I would throw the ball and it would hit him right in the glove and boom, it'd go off. He'd go to the fence and get it. And that was just my dad. When I think about times when I was getting my brains beat out and I was either hitting every batter I faced or somebody was hitting a home run, I was just sucking eggs. My dad would call timeout and he'd walk out on the pitcher's mound even until I was 15 years old. And he would never really talk to me, Ken, about mechanics. He would never really talk to me about strategy. He would just say, as I've told you before, he'd rub my elbow. He always thought my elbow was hurting. And he'd say, now son, he'd say, we're going to go home here pretty soon. That's what Dad would say. And that would just kind of help me cool my jets a minute and then I'd carry on with the game. He was not particularly educated. He finished 4 grades of school. He just worked hard. He loved my mother. Shortly after marrying my mother, he took Laquita and I, my sister, he took us to court. And we stood before a judge. That judge's bench, as they call it, man, I used to think that was the biggest thing. You could hardly see the judge over it. But the judge had us stand right there. And he asked my sister and I questions about this adoption. I think I might have been 6 or 7 years old. My sister was a year older. And I had to answer this judge directly those questions. And I was just learning the process of being adopted. Walking in that court one day as Anthony Wayne Honeycutt and walking out of that court as Anthony Wayne Legear. I always appreciated my dad doing that. Do you know my birth certificate? My birth certificate says I was born August 6, 1958 in Veneta, Oklahoma. And my father was a carpenter from Bonifay, Florida named Moses Legear. It's quite amazing adoption how quite complete it is. There's no mention of my paternal birth. It's just like I was born in Veneta, Oklahoma, and my daddy's name was Moses Legear. Adoption was a really cool thing. My dad impressed me as a man's man. He worked hard. He expected me to work. He showed me maybe one time how to cut the grass. He might have showed me one time how to wash a car. But he was a man's man. He had the classic farmer's tan. He worked in long sleeves. He rolled them up. And he would walk on a piece of property where there'd be nothing. And at the end of the day, he would have it all the grades shot and the corners squared and would be digging footings with a square shovel. And within just a matter of weeks, he'd be building something. My dad was a soldier. My dad was in World War II. He used to have a footlocker in a storage room at our house. It was a shed outside. And it had a big old huge lock on it like you'd see on a treasure chest. Big fat lock. And only my dad had the key. And only when he was out there would we go in his footlocker. And I never got to go in it and pillage through it. It was always he would open it, and I could see inside of it as a kid. And I could see stuff like this. This is a World War II German helmet. Now, when I'd ask my dad about how he got it or where he got it, he would never answer. It's in horrible shape today. One thing my dad did that I wish he didn't ask me first is he gave this to his grandson, my nephew. It had been in a Foot Locker for years. And I found it one time on my nephew, who might be watching this on television, and you should be ashamed. This was on a shelf in the garage, and so it's gotten rusty. But my dad kept it in a Foot Locker for a long time. And one thing I know about this little German dude is he had a little head. But you know what? I look at that and I'd ask my dad, so Dad, how'd you get that? You know? The old German potato masher, they called it. A German hand grenade. Don't throw it. I'd ask Dad, how you got that, Dad? And he would always kind of defer. He would never really answer the question. A German belt buckle. I got some other little things that I stole from my nephew. I asked my sister if I could have them. And she got them for me. It's funny, wasn't it, James? My dad, he never really wanted to talk about the war. I always thought he was an anti-aircraft gunner. I didn't know exactly what his MOS was in the Army. But he never talked about that. It was really very, very interesting. My dad was a brave man. He was strong. He was a godly man. He locked our doors at night. He walked through the house locking the 2 or 3 doors that we had. He'd always check on Lady. He took care of our dog. Lady was his dog, the outside in the yard dog. And then he locked the doors. And it would typically be the last one to go to bed. And he woke me up every morning for at least 12 years with these words. Son, it's time to eat. Wasn't good morning. Hey, get up, let's go, get to school. My dad would come to the door, and after he'd done it for so many years, my own clock inside, I could hear him sometimes coming to the door. 5:20 in the morning for 12 years. Son, it's time to eat. I'd get up. I'd make my way to the table, my sister and I, mother and I, and we would have breakfast that my dad had cooked, full breakfast, eggs, grits, the whole deal. It would take me about 3 minutes to eat it. And then we could go back to bed if we wanted to, or if we had homework, we could stay up and do homework before school. But my dad did that. Can I tell you, more times than once, I wish now I would have sat at that table a little longer. Say, Dad, what are you doing today? Where are you going to be today? What are you building today? But you just don't really think that way, do you, when you're a kid? You're just grateful for a breakfast. My dad prayed the same blessing over the meal for all those 12, 13 years. My dad had one prayer. He was a one-prayer man. And he could pray that blessing prayer. And I knew when he prayed that prayer, I would get busy and eat my breakfast and then go to bed. Today, my dad's with Jesus. I'm confident of that. In fact, I made mention at my mother's funeral just 2 years ago, August 2015, that when my mother made to heaven, when my mother went into heaven's gate, or however that all works, when my mother got there, my mother likely had to be greeted by 3 husbands. And so I said at her funeral that when she got into heaven and had to meet these 3 husbands, she probably slapped one, kicked the other one, and ran to my daddy, Buddy Legear. My dad's grave marker in Panama City, right off of 23rd Street, is very simple, very plain. So him. It just says Moses Legear, 1921 to 1998. And there's a little dash in between those numbers. What strikes me so much when I think about that is that so much of the dash was about me. His life, and I'm just telling a story that every one of you could tell, hopefully, about your dad. My dad's life was his family. He had a daughter named Linda by his first marriage. Linda is yet beautiful today. Matter of fact, she looks a lot like my dad. She is very sweet, very talented. She was a wonderful, bigger sister for me. She was very kind to me. Could you imagine? I think Linda was in high school when her dad married my mother, and boom, overnight she gets two scrawny kids sharing a little house out there on Allison Avenue in Panama City. And Linda was always very kind to me and is still kind to me today. I love Linda. She's very sweet. But my dad loved me. He loved Laquita, my sister. My dad taught me how to treat a lady. He never taught me with words. In fact, my dad was not really what you call a mentoring teacher. I went to him one time, Isaac, I think I was in 5th grade. And I was talking to my dad about a girlfriend that I had. And I was telling him, Dad, you know, she's probably the most beautiful girl at our school, and everybody loves her. She's very popular, and you know, Dad, she's crazy about me. But Dad, she has horrible breath. And so I'll never forget my dad and his great wisdom. He reached down in those khaki pants that he worked in every day, and he gave me half a roll of certs. And he said, "Here, son, give her one of these." He taught us how to be faithful to God. He not only loved my mother dearly, he was faithful to God, he was faithful to the church. My dad loved the church. My dad was kind to pastors. Now granted, his pastor, probably one of the last pastors my father had, was his own father-in-law. My granddad was our pastor for many years. But Dad always was gracious to pastors. He helped them. He fixed whatever needed to be fixed. It was my dad that went to the church early on Sundays, turned everything on, lights, air conditioners. It was my dad and my Uncle Ulysses that typically cleaned the church yards the Saturday before, and we were always there. It was my dad and Uncle Ulysses that typically cooked the men's breakfast on Saturday morning. It was my dad that handed out the Sunday school material on Sunday morning. It was always exciting when the new quarterlies would be delivered. My dad would put those out for the teachers. In few words, I'd hear him, though, when he'd pray. I'd see him pray on the job site. We'd be driving down the road, and he'll just say, "Praise you, Jesus." How many times did he say that? Just like he's in another world. He would never say, "Now, son, this is how to be faithful." He never said, "Now, son, this is how to pray." He never said, "Now, son, this is the way you treat your wife." He never said any of those things. He just is my hero because he modeled all these wonderful qualities. Heroes, you see, are motivated by the dash, the line in between the dates. And on this Father's Day, we're all filling in that dash. We're all doing our best to make the most of it. You might wonder, well, how? Some of you are beyond your fathering years, and maybe you're not a father, or maybe your kids are all grown up and grown out. Well, how do we do that? How do we make the most of the dash? Well, make a note of this. One, if you have the privilege as a father or a grandfather, making the most of the dash means walking a little slower through the house. Brenda and I just sold our Spanish Fort, Alabama house this time last year. I regret now selling it. Now, both of my sons, our sons, are moving back to Daphne, Alabama in the next 2 weeks. We're thrilled for them to do that. But there's that house. Chase called me just the other day. He said, "Yeah, Dad, I went in the old neighborhood." He said, "Boy, the neighborhood's changed." He says, they don't keep the yards as well as they used to." I'm thinking, well, we bought a brand new house. We bought the model home. We bought the parade home, the largest home in the subdivision, in 1998, right there. And Chase is talking about how the grass is all grown up and how it's just not the same place. But can I tell you, if I still had that house, yeah, I think Brenda and I we'd walk a little slower. The boys basically owned the upstairs. They had bedrooms, bathrooms, and a big old television room up there, family room. And now I wish I'd have spent more time just maybe sitting on the foot of their beds and talking to them about their day. Just go a little slower. How do you make the most of it? Well, you roll with the unexpected. And you help us to navigate the unexpected. How many of you could write a book today about the unexpected? Those things that just came upon us that we were not expecting. And if we were not on our toes spiritually, they could have certainly derailed our lives for a season. Well, the best way to make the most of the dash is learn to roll with the expected. Shoot! Maybe expect the unexpected. Now, Brenda, you didn't hear me say that, honey. Brenda's the best at expecting the unexpected. Sometime my little wife, it'll be a beautiful day outside, and I'll say, look, that's beautiful. Look, those clouds are just beautiful. And Brenda will say, yeah, but it could rain any minute. Yeah, those clouds could turn black any second now. So Brenda does all the expectation for us. She's a doll. She told me this morning I was a great father. I appreciate that, honey. How do we make the most of the dash? Model the values that you want your children and your grandchildren to practice. Oh, my goodness. Again, I just hope that I did a decent job with our children in modeling our values, because they've already had unexpected events in their lives, and I hope that they've weathered them. But I wanted to model the values that I hope that they will practice. And I got a little grandson. Did y'all know that we've got a grandbaby? I don't know if I had told y'all that. His name is Cruz Wayne, and I think he's blessed. I think Sarah's dad is a godly man and very much involved. Sarah's parents are very much involved in Cruz's life as we are. And I think Cruz is going to have a good environment. When our boys were 13 years old, Chad, they're 5 years apart. And so they knew when they got 13, that was a big birthday for us. So I'd say to them, well, where would you like to go? Now, granted, and I was grateful that at 13, their worldview was not really that broad. And so Chad, when he turned 13, well, naturally, he wanted to go to an Atlanta Braves game. So we hopped a plane, got a nice downtown hotel, just Chad and me. Went to Atlanta to watch the Atlanta Braves play. I bought a $5 baseball when I went in and a $3 pen that goes with it. And we went out there, we got there a little early for batting practice. And we were just with the throng of people out there in the left field, just hoping that these players, when the guys would hit the ball, that the players would turn around and, toss the ball up to you. And so we're all up there begging, give us the ball, give us. And of course, half the time these guys wouldn't even turn around. These guys would not even recognize that you were out there. It was just pre-game, and I wanted this to be a good experience for Chad, his 13th birthday. And in fact, one of the fans out there got so upset with the snobbery from the players out on the field that they said, hey, we pay your salaries up here. Like that was going to make them turn around and throw us a baseball. But it didn't. But the truth of the matter is those guys, those players had no clue. Maybe they have a clue today, but they certainly didn't that day. They had no clue that just a simple act of kindness, just a little acknowledgement, little guys up there that would just love for them to turn around and say, hey, kid, or throw them a ball, would have made them heroes in those children's eyes for the rest of their lives. Now, Chase, on the other hand, when Chase turned 13, where did he want to go? And again, I'm glad that they didn't really have a broad worldview. Chase wanted to explore every skateboard park from Daphne, Alabama we ended up in Panama City. We put our surfboards on top of the car, and Chase and I took off and just stopped for every skateboard park we could find, and we surfed on the way home in Perdido Key, and he reminded me of this just the other day. Hey, Dad, remember when we were surfing? And the shark got between the two of us. I said, yeah, I remember that. He was on a board over there, I was on a board over here, and we were going back out, but you could see the shark in the wave. And what do? I mean, you learn by watching Flipper that you shouldn't make a lot of noise in the water, so you just stop. And it's amazing what Chase remembered about that. What do heroes think about? And I'm speaking to you ladies as well. What do heroes, what's on their mind? What do they value, and what do they live for? Jimmy Carter will probably go down as maybe not one of the most respected presidents. And it's really kind of unfortunate in a way, all the stuff that came his way. You remember double-digit inflation. You remember the gas lines. You remember 444 days our embassy members were hostages in Iran. So it was a very tough day. But one thing you got to give President Carter credit for. In fact, I saw him on television just the other day. He was on an airplane flight and was just walking down the aisle in the airplane, just shaking people's hands. This white-headed President Jimmy Carter. But you know what I appreciate about him is he's still involved in Habitat for Humanity, building houses for people that need homes. And you got to applaud that. George W. Bush today still looks for ways and participates in runs and bike rides with soldiers and just looks for opportunities to host them, particularly at his ranch. Remember Magic Johnson? Magic Johnson, Irvin Johnson, that used to play for Los Angeles Lakers. Great basketball player, probably some would say one of the greatest. Well, did you know, with all of his wealth, he's done a lot of things. But one thing is, he started what is called magic theaters. These are movie theaters that he strategically placed in depressed communities, nice first-class communities, because he wanted families to be able to go to movies. And he also wanted to give young people opportunity to work and to have jobs that they would not ordinarily get. And that's what motivated Irvin Johnson in bringing Irvin Johnson, magic theaters to cities like Detroit and throughout Chicago and depressed areas. Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow has built hospitals in third world countries, one particularly in the Philippines where his parents were missionaries. He still has a great heart for kids. He has the Tim Tebow Foundation. God love him. I don't know if he's ever going to play ball again. I think he's having a pretty good run at baseball. He's a great guy. I just read his recent book, and it's really a good read. He's a good guy. He's another one of those guys that's not understood by the populace and the media, and they are just so hateful. But here's a guy who particularly invests in special needs citizens and even has involved our churches. I always wondered what I would do because the special needs kids are invited to churches, and the churches typically, or the high school, host a great high school prom for special needs kids. It's quite an amazing thing. These people are grown adults now, but they're going to proms. They're given suits, they're given dresses, they get their hair done for free. They are brought on red carpet. Every one of them gets a crown because every one of them is the prom king or queen for that night. It's quite an amazing thing, and Tim Tebow's foundation supports that and generates that. I'll have to say even our own president left $1 million enterprise. He takes no salary from our U.S. Treasury. I think he has to take the salary, but he has donated his salary, which is about $428,000 a year. That's more than I make, but that's not a bad donation. And yet he gets bashed, maligned, disrespected every day. Don't you wonder what tomorrow's news is going to bring about our president tomorrow? So what do heroes live for? Heroes live for somebody else. Heroes find their completeness in completing someone else. Heroes rarely ask how they can get credit. If I can lift you up, a hero would say, I will do it. Some heroes, on the other hand, live for themselves. Our culture has made them heroes. They live for today. You kids never heard of him, but his name is John Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi had a song back in the day called It's My Life. And everybody loved the song. But when you listen to the lyrics, it says, it's my life. I started to bring it in here today, but I was afraid, nobody knows who John Bon Jovi. He used to pack out coliseums and stadiums. Now, I think he's got a gig in Las Vegas for about 100 people. It's my life, he says. It's now or never. I'm not going to live forever. I just want to live while I'm alive. That's pretty deep thinking there. But his song reminds us that the question is not really how long we're going to live, but how well we'll live. I shared with a hospice family just of late, a lady who was having difficulty caring for her husband, her father. And her difficulty was because her father, down through their life, had not been particularly benevolent to her, loving to her. In fact, I gathered from listening to her that he might have even been emotionally abusive to her. Now he's 90 years old, and he's dependent on people to take care of him. And she was really grappling with caring for her father. She's come from way out of town here to the city to care for this dad, and he is still just as raunchy and gripey and demanding and ugly to her. But yet when the little home instead caregivers come in, he's very charming with the little young ladies that take care of him, and he's really concerned about how hard they work in taking care of him. But here's a lady who herself is almost 70, and she steps back and she says, "My dad never tells me thank you." She's almost 70 years old, and all she can remember is how their whole lives she never did enough for her dad. You see, some guys that are deemed heroes don't deserve it because they live only for themselves. Job, in writing his story, the oldest book in the Bible, you know, he was a hero of himself. Job was a man who lost everything. And in God's grace, it was all given back to him. But he said these words, "Man born of a woman has but a few days." So I want to say, dads and single moms and grandparents here today, you probably deny you're a hero to someone. I know some of you are heroes. I see the way your grandchildren look to you. I see the way your great-grandchildren look to you. Maybe those around you, on the other hand, give little indication that you're appreciated. Maybe your kids are just so enamored with their own stuff that they never really say thank you to you or express any appreciation. But on this Father's Day, whether you are valued or not, mom, dad, we all live as carriers of our children. That's what the book of Deuteronomy said at the beginning. As a father carries his son. And our selfless compassion for our families reflect the God of the Word and the compassionate God that He has on those who fear Him. It was a strange thing this morning to get a call from my son wishing me Father's Day, Happy Father's Day. And then for me to be able to say to him, well, hey, by the way, Happy Father's Day to you too. It was early this morning when he called. Obviously, he didn't get a lot of sleep because the little goober was already up. So that's kind of a strange thing. I hung up the phone. I thought, that's just kind of strange to tell your son Happy Father's Day. You may or may not be a hero. You may not feel like you're a hero. But I want to encourage you and me, whether you're a mom, a dad, a grandparent, or just a loving wife or a loving husband, what you and I can do today is be more concerned with the dash and find the completeness in that dash in between the numbers. I hope nobody's thinking about kicking the bucket in here today. But there is a better investment you and I can make. There's a more concerted effort we can make in enhancing the dash. And I hope that when it's all said and done, I'd like to think Michael Forche's having a birthday next week. You get $100 if you guess exactly how old he'll be, because he's not telling us. But he says it involves a 0. Can I tell you, I hope, Mike, I don't know that I'll ever retire. I'd like to retire. I have friends that are already retired. I'd like for my wife to retire. Brenda deserves a different pace of life. But I'm asking God to give me 20 more years of ministry. Maybe you're like me, you're not satisfied with the dash just yet. You think there's more you can do. You think there's more people you can touch, bless, give to. You ever given a car away because you thought somebody needed it? I want to do that a few times again. You ever fix somebody's tire on the side of the road? They didn't know you? I'd like to do that again. You ever gotten to speaking into anybody's life who is young and got the cat by the tail and just idealistic, and you're able just to look them right in the eyes and say, now, have fun with this. I've told many young ministers that. Don't forget to have fun. Laugh. Be around people that make you laugh. I hope I have 20 more years to address the dash. I hope I can be a blessing to you. And I hope I can be a blessing to my own sons, my children. And one Cruz Wayne Legear, who I know today thinks I hung the moon. Moses Legear was my hero. He was a great model. And on this Father's Day, I don't know that I ever have in my 35 years plus of ministry dedicated a day to him. I just wanted to salute him. And I want to encourage you. The dash is right in front of us.